The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. Welcome back to the Berean Pursuit. It's week 2, day 3 of our journey through the whole Bible. And I'm so glad you've joined me as we seek truth and to grow in faith together. And today's reading is from Genesis 21 through 23, Psalm 107, and Mark chapter 8. Before we read it, let's take a minute to review the journey so far. So far in Genesis, we've been tracing the life of Abraham, who's the man that God chose to receive a covenant promise that he would become the father of many nations. And yesterday, we saw God's judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah, demonstrating his true hatred of sin, but also his mercy towards Lot and his family. And today we're going to see the fulfillment of God's promise, at least in part, as well as a story that prophesies about the sacrifice of Jesus. Okay, let's go ahead and get into the reading in Genesis chapter 21. Now the Lord attended to Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. So Sarah conceived and bore a son to Abraham in his old age at the very time God had promised. And Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore to him. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Then Sarah said, "God has made me laugh, and everyone who hears of this will laugh with me." She added, "Who would have told Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age." So the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham held a great feast on the day Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham was mocking her son. And she said to Abraham, "Expel the slave woman and her son, for the slave woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." Now this matter distressed Abraham greatly, because it concerned his son Ishmael. But God said to Abraham, "Do not be distressed about the boy and your maidservant. Listen to everything that Sarah tells you, for through Isaac your offspring will be reckoned. But I will also make a nation of the slave woman's son, because he is your offspring." Early in the morning, Abraham got up, took bread and a skin of water, put them on Hagar's shoulders, and sent her away with the boy. She left and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she left the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat down nearby, about a bowshot away, for she said, "I cannot bear to watch the boy die." And as she sat nearby, she lifted up her voice and wept. Then God heard the voice of the boy, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven, "What is wrong, Hagar? Do not be afraid, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he lies. Get up, lift up the boy, and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. And God was with the boy, and he grew up and settled in the wilderness and became a great archer. And while he was dwelling in the wilderness of Paran, his mother got a wife for him from the land of Egypt. At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, said to Abraham, "God is with you in all that you do. Now therefore swear to me here before God that you will not deal falsely with me or my children or descendants. Show to me and to the country in which you reside the same kindness that I have shown to you." And Abraham replied, "I swear it." But when Abraham complained to Abimelech about a well that Abimelech's servants had seized, Abimelech replied, "I do not know who has done this. You did not tell me, so I have not heard about it until today." So Abraham brought sheep and cattle and gave them to Abimelech, and the two men made a covenant. Abraham separated 7 ewe lambs from the flock, and Abimelech asked him, "Why have you set apart these 7 ewe lambs?" He replied, "You are to accept the 7 ewe lambs from my hand as a witness that I dug this well." So that place was called Beersheba, because it was there that the two of them swore an oath. After they had made the covenant at Beersheba, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, got up and returned to the land of the Philistines. And Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and there he called upon the name of the Lord, the eternal God. And Abraham resided in the land of the Philistines for a long time. Sometime later, God tested Abraham and said to him, "Abraham." "Here I am," he answered. "Take your son," God said, "your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. Offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I will show you." So Abraham got up early the next morning, saddled his donkey, and took along 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. He split the wood for a burnt offering and set out for the place God had designated. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. "Stay here with the donkey," Abraham told his servants. "The boy and I will go over there to worship, and then we will return to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac. He himself carried the fire and the sacrificial knife, and the 2 of them walked on together. Then Isaac said to his father Abraham, "My father." "Here I am, my son," he replied. "The fire and the wood are here," said Isaac, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the 2 walked on together. When they arrived at the place God had designated, Abraham built the altar there and arranged the wood. He bound his son Isaac and placed him on the altar atop the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. Just then, the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy or do anything to him," said the angel, "for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your only son from me." Then Abraham looked up and saw behind him a ram in a thicket caught by its horns. So he went and took the ram and offered it as a burnt offering in place of his son. And Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide." So to this day it is said, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." And the angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time, saying, "By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your only son, I will surely bless you and will multiply your descendants like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will possess the gates of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations of the earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice." Abraham went back to his servants, and they got up and set out together for Beersheba, and Abraham settled in Beersheba. Sometime later, Abraham was told, "Milcah has also borne sons to your brother Nahor. Uz the firstborn, his brother Buz, Kemuel, the father of Aram, Chesed, Hazo, Pildash, Jidlaph, and Bethuel. And Bethuel became the father of Rebekah. Milcah bore these 8 sons to Abraham's brother Nahor. Moreover, Nahor's concubine, whose name was Rumah, bore Tebah, Gaham, Tahash, and Maachah. Now Sarah lived to be 127 years old. She died in Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham went out to mourn and to weep for her. Then Abraham got up from beside his dead wife and said to the Hittites, "I am a foreigner and an outsider among you. Give me a burial site among you so that I can bury my dead." The Hittites replied to Abraham, "Listen to us, sir. You are God's chosen one among us. Bury your dead in the finest of our tombs. None of us will withhold his tomb for burying your dead." Then Abraham rose and bowed down before the people of the land, the Hittites. "If you are willing for me to bury my dead," he said to them, "listen to me and approach Ephron, the son of Zohar, on my behalf to sell me the cave of Machpelah that belongs to him. It is at the end of his field. Let him sell it to me in your presence for full price, so that I may have a burial site." Now Ephron was sitting among the sons of Heth, so in the presence of all the Hittites who had come to the gate of his city, Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham, "No, my lord, listen to me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of my people. Bury your dead." Again Abraham bowed down before the people of the land and said to Ephron in their presence, "If you will please listen to me, I will pay you the price of the field. Accept it from me, so that I may bury my dead there." Ephron answered Abraham, "Listen to me, my lord. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver, but what is that between you and me? Bury your dead." Abraham agreed to Ephron's terms and weighed out for him the price he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver, according to the standard of the merchants. So Ephron's field at Machpelah near Mamre, the cave that was in it, and all the trees within the boundaries of the field were deeded over to Abraham's possession in the presence of all the Hittites who had come to the gate of his city. After this, Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave of the field at Machpelah near Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So the field and its cave were deeded by the Hittites to Abraham as a burial site. All right, and now let's read Psalm 107. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His loving devotion endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, whom he has redeemed from the hand of the enemy and gathered from the lands, from east and west, from north and south. Some wandered in desert wastelands, finding no path to a city in which to dwell. They were hungry and thirsty, their soul fainted within them. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress. He led them on a straight path to reach a city where they could live. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his loving devotion and his wonders to the sons of men. For he satisfies the thirsty and fills the hungry with good things. Some sat in darkness and in the shadow of death, prisoners in affliction and chains, because they rebelled against the words of God and despised the counsel of the Most High. He humbled their hearts with hard labor. They stumbled, and there was no one to help. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them from their distress. He brought them out of darkness and the shadow of death and broke away their chains. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his loving devotion and his wonders to the sons of men. For he has broken down the gates of bronze and cut through the bars of iron. Fools in their rebellious ways and through their iniquities suffered affliction. They loathed all food and drew near to the gates of death. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them from their distress. He sent forth his word and healed them. He rescued them from the pit. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his loving devotion and his wonders to the sons of men. Let them offer sacrifices of thanksgiving and declare his works with rejoicing. Others went out to sea in ships, conducting trade on the mighty waters. They saw the works of the Lord and his wonders in the deep, for he spoke and raised a tempest that lifted the waves of the sea. They mounted up to the heavens, then sunk to the depths. Their courage melted in their anguish. They reeled and staggered like drunkards, and all their skill was useless. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he brought them out of their distress. He calmed the storm to a whisper, and the waves of the sea were hushed. They rejoiced in the silence, and he guided them to the harbor they desired. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his loving devotion and his wonders to the sons of men. Let them exalt him in the assembly of the people and praise him in the council of the elders. He turns rivers into deserts, springs of water into thirsty ground, and fruitful land into fields of salt because of the wickedness of its dwellers. He turns a desert into pools of water and a dry land into flowing springs. He causes the hungry to settle there, that they may establish a city in which to dwell. They sow fields and plant vineyards that yield a fruitful harvest. He blesses them, and they multiply greatly. He does not let their herds diminish. When they are decreased and humbled by oppression, evil, and sorrow, he pours out contempt on the nobles and makes them wander in a trackless wasteland. But he lifts the needy from affliction and increases their families like flocks. The upright see and rejoice, and all iniquity shuts its mouth. Let him who is wise pay heed to these things and consider the loving devotion of the Lord. All right, let's go ahead and go to the New Testament in the Gospel of Mark. In the Gospel of Mark, Jesus is going to continue his ministry of teaching and preaching and healing and things like that, proving who he is. Yesterday, we saw him challenge the Pharisees and emphasize how important it is to have our heart with God and obey him rather than the traditions of men and just seek to please those in society around us. All right, now let's read from Mark chapter 8. In those days, the crowd once again became very large, and they had nothing to eat. Jesus called the disciples to him and said, I have compassion for this crowd because they have already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they will faint along the way, for some of them have come a great distance. His disciples replied, Where in this desolate place could anyone find enough bread to feed all these people? How many loaves do you have? Jesus asked. 7, they replied. And he instructed the crowd to sit down on the ground. Then he took the 7 loaves, gave thanks, and broke them, and gave them to his disciples to set before the people, and they distributed them to the crowd. They also had a few small fish, and Jesus blessed them and ordered that these be set before them as well. The people ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over, and about 4,000 men were present. As soon as Jesus had dismissed the crowd, he got into the boat with his disciples and went to the district of Dalmanutha. Then the Pharisees came and began to argue with Jesus, testing him by demanding from him a sign from heaven. Jesus sighed deeply in his spirit and said, Why does this generation demand a sign? Truly I say to you, no sign will be given to this generation. And he left them, got back into the boat, and crossed to the other side. Now the disciples had forgotten to take bread, except for 1 loaf that they had with them in the boat. Watch out, he cautioned them. Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of Herod. So they began to discuss with one another the fact that they had no bread. Aware of their conversation, Jesus asked them, Why are you debating about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? Do you have such hard hearts? Having eyes, do you not see? And having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember? When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many basketfuls of broken pieces did you collect? 12, they answered. And when I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many basketfuls of broken pieces did you collect? 7, they said. Then he asked them, Do you still not understand? When they arrived at Bethsaida, some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. So he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. Then he spit on the man's eyes and placed his hands on him. Can you see anything? He asked. The man looked up and said, I can see the people, but they look like trees walking around. Once again, Jesus placed his hands on the man's eyes, and when he opened them, his sight was restored, and he could see everything clearly. Jesus sent him home and said, Do not go back into the village. Then Jesus and his disciples went on to the villages around Caesarea Philippi. On the way, he questioned his disciples, Who do people say I am? They replied, Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others, one of the prophets. But what about you? Jesus asked. Who do you say I am? Peter answered, You are the Christ. And Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. Then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and scribes, and that he must be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He spoke this message quite frankly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But Jesus, turning and looking at his disciples, rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men." Then Jesus called the crowd to him along with his disciples, and he told them, "If anyone wants to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and for the gospel will save it. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world, yet forfeit his soul? Or what can a man give in exchange for his soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels." All right, and that is the reading for today. In Genesis chapter 21, it marks the fulfillment of God's promise as Isaac is born to Abraham and Sarah in their old age. Isaac means laughter, and he brought a laughter of joy now, rather than the laughter of doubt that we saw from Sarah before. And this moment is followed by the difficult separation of Hagar and Ishmael. But even there, God proves very faithful to them as he provides for their needs. In chapter 22, it presents the story of Abraham's test of faith when God commanded him to offer Isaac as a sacrifice. Abraham proved his faith through obedience, and apparently without any argument. God providing a ram in Isaac's place is a shadow of the ultimate sacrifice of Jesus Christ in our place. He is our lamb. He is our sacrifice that the Lord provided. In chapter 23, Abraham bought a burial place for Sarah, and that's going to be the only land that he ever owned in Canaan. And that's going to show up again several times as a burial place for those in his family. Psalm 107 invites us to reflect on the goodness of God. It talks about how he delivers his people from trouble and how he satisfies their deepest needs. The Psalm's line, "Let them give thanks to the Lord for his loving devotion," is essentially the theme of the psalm, which reminds us of God's lasting faithfulness and his power to save. In Mark chapter 8, we encountered a series of critical events. We saw Jesus feeding the 4,000 this time, demonstrating compassion and ability to provide for needs, even when something supernatural is necessary to do that. And he challenged the disciples to really understand his mission, why he came. And he warns them against the spiritual blindness of the Pharisees. Peter declared that Jesus is the Christ, and that's a huge point, as it shows the slowness of the disciples to recognize who Jesus is, but the signs, the evidence is really getting through now. They're getting it. And that's also then followed by Jesus teaching about his coming suffering, his crucifixion, his death, his resurrection, and then him calling on us to suffer with him, to deny ourselves, take up our cross, and follow him. There is a cost to true discipleship, but the eternal reward of following him is absolutely worth it. Well, thank you for joining me today on the Berean Pursuit. I hope you'll join me tomorrow again as we continue our journey to seek truth and to grow in our understanding of God's Word. Until then, may you remain steadfast in your pursuit of him. And I'm going to leave you with a song. This is a song that we teach to children, but it's a message that all of us need. It's the message that we see in the story of Abraham in today's reading. Obedience is the very best way to show that you believe. Doing exactly what the Lord commands and doing it happily. Action is the key, do it immediately, and joy you will receive. Obedience is the very best way to show that you believe. OBEDIENCE. Obedience is the very best way to show that you believe.